gives us the thumbs up. Mayor, I'm gonna call on you first.
He's eating.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. My name is Eddie Robertson, and I'm chairman of the Capital Projects Committee. This meeting has been duly noticed, so I'd like to call it to order and have each of the members of this committee to introduce themselves for the record.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Arlene Cunningham, and I represent Ward 3 as your alternate. Oh. Which one should I push? The middle? Oh. Am I good? Good evening. My name is Arlene Cunningham, and I am the alderman for Ward 3. Thank you.
My name is Steve Brown. I'm the alderman for Ward 4 and chairman of the General Committee.
And I'm Eddie Robertson. I'm alderman in Ward 6 and pleased to be the chairman of this committee. So first of all, you have the agenda in front of you. If you would look at it, if there are any changes or additions, if not, I will entertain a motion to accept the agenda. All right, have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting the agenda say aye. Aye. And that's unanimous. So we're under item number 3, and to begin this meeting, I'd like to call on the mayor because I know he's had recent meetings with some county officials, so I'd like for him to kind of kick it off and kind of give us how we should proceed with the staff on this.
Sure. I'll give you an update on the conversation I had today, and if y'all have questions about some of the other items on here, feel free to ask. This is an item that hasn't been discussed, as far as I know, in the city at all. And it started when I had conversations with Costco and about the improvements that we expected them to make on Forestry Retreat Road and New Shackle Island. Folks at Costco asked for some help on the construction cost. I suggested, considering the amount of taxes they would pay to Hendersonville compared to the amount of taxes they pay to the county, that they should also seek some help from the county as well. I had a couple conversations with our county mayor about that, encouraged Costco to talk to the county mayor about that, and the outcome of that was the county mayor asked if the city of Hendersonville would be interested in helping on a project in the city of Gallatin. As I said, it's not something I think anybody here has heard about. If you're on Vietnam Veterans Boulevard, State Highway 386, heading toward Gallatin, when you hit Long Hollow Pike, it becomes, traffic backs up a little bit there. It becomes traffic signals there. And you've got about a stretch, probably about 3/4 of a mile before you hit 109. That's the section that the county mayor was talking about, asking if the city of Hendersonville will be interested in helping with that. It's entirely within the city of Gallatin. I was a little bit surprised to have him ask me that. So I met with County Mayor today, Holt, and with the Mayor of Gallatin, Paige Brown, today, and they gave me a little bit more information. That project is probably in the neighborhood of a $100 million project. They feel like the Greater Nashville Regional Council is interested in funding, will be interested in funding it, which is about $80 million if it's the typical 80% match. Mayor Holt feels like the county, of the remaining $20 million, the county would probably be willing possibly of kicking in $10 million and asking the cities of Gallatin and Hendersonville to fund the remaining $10 million equally. That may go up, that may go down, but I told them that I would come here and let y'all be made aware of that, that somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million Hendersonville share for that project. Again, it's wholly within the city of Gallatin, and I just want to put that on your radar.
Questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. What are they going to do over there? I mean, are they going to widen it? It sounds like a gigantic project.
It will be a big project. Still not exactly sure how exactly everything connects there, what property they take, how big it would be, the overall project scope of it. But the point that they made with us is that Vietnam Veterans Boulevard will be 6 lanes, a good portion of it, and then you've got 6 lanes coming down to that. I don't know there would actually be 6 lanes at that point on 386. My understanding is the 6 lanes end at Saundersville Road. So I don't know exactly what that would look like. Again, entirely within City of Gallatin.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Question.
Yes.
What's the time frame on that, Mayor?
I don't know.
So that's just basically discussion.
So does the widening of 386 contingent upon this
No,
expenditure that's totally separate?
totally separate.
Totally separate.
State is handling 386, doesn't go through the GNRC at all. The state is working that, and the latest I've heard from TDOT through Jimmy Johnston was that they're still on schedule to bid the first phase, which hopefully get under construction in 2024, which is an incredibly aggressive schedule, but they have not wavered from that. Part of the reason they're able to do that is all 4 phases will be design build, so they move faster. The first phase is the bridge that gets you to Davidson County, which is a pretty sizable project, but that's a completely separate project than what we've been talking about.
Well, my personal feel is that I always like to cooperate with our county and other cities, but in looking at this list in front of us tonight, we have so many needs. I can't see where we can come up with $5 million to help in that project. So I don't know what the next step is, but that's my own opinion.
Okay.
I don't think we're ready to take any action tonight. So just keep us abreast, I guess, of as we move forward. And if there's a need to reconvene this committee meeting, we will.
Okay. One other thing, if I have a second, go ahead. I want to add one more thing, but go ahead.
Well, after you add the one more thing, could you give us an update of the widening of the 386?
Sure. So one thing I want to add is that I asked Mayor Holt, since what precipitated this was asking him and asking the county to help with the cost of Costco. And I asked him, what does this mean as far as the county helping Costco? And he said that any assistance from the county for Costco would be entirely contingent upon how much assistance Hendersonville provides for this project. Did you want to ask something about that? Okay. Go ahead.
What kind of assistance are we looking to give Costco? Because I wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry.
The closest thing that we gave assistance to Costco was $150,000 toward a traffic
That's
signal
what I thought.
that is somewhat already needed.
But then we would recoup that cost with the land
Exactly.
sale to the hospital, right?
Exactly.
Or most of it anyway.
Right.
Is there any additional construction costs that Costco is looking to get from us or the
Not from
county?
us. Not from us, but I'd suggest they talk to the county about the widening. They'll have to do a new Shackle out in Forestry Retreat. As far as I'm concerned, we're done and we satisfy what Costco asked of us. But I hope they will continue to ask for some help from the county.
Well, the new Shackle, though, is a state highway.
And Costco's still on. There's our requirements for what they needed from us. Adding that use was to widen that state highway, and they're going to be
Right.
responsible for that cost. I was hoping that the county could help them with some of those costs.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Sure. Now you're fine.
Just say that I think that's probably all going to be a moot point here in about 4 months of who says what. And I think there's going to be some changes made. Well, I know there isn't that one particular
Yeah.
that you're speaking of, so, I guess we can address that at another time.
I felt I should provide you the information that I had. So, Vietnam Veterans Boulevard, it's in 4 phases. The first phase is that bridge, and then 3 other phases getting to Saundersville Road. Widen on both sides of it, as well as shoulders that will be built to the standards that are necessary to have buses on the shoulders. But that also means that at some point it could have cars on those shoulders and be a 4th lane. So initially it will be 3 general access lanes and then bus on shoulder. But also keep in mind, and this is something that I failed to talk about some, is that they will also extend the acceleration and deceleration lanes. That's where the problem is on Vietnam Veterans Boulevard, is when people are merging and people are trying to get or trying to exit. And by lengthening all of those, it will have a big impact. Just as people get up to speed and as people slow down, they won't have to do that in the general lanes. The price continues to go up, as y'all can imagine. But TDOT feels like, as again, via Jimmy Johnson at Forward Sumner, that they're still on the timeline they've given us, and the construction on that bridge should be bid and work should be moving in 2024. That's exceptional, if you ask me, that they're able to do that as quickly as they are. So, and we hope they are. It's all their money, all their money. So,
What about the new interchange at Forestry?
That's in phase, I'm going to look over here, Sarah, there's no reason she should know this, 2 or 3. Okay. Again, there's no reason she should know that's fully a TDOT project. That's in phase 2 or 3. TDOT already owns the property there. I think they owned it when they built the bypass 30-something years ago. So that's not really an issue. The issue is getting to that phase. It will be a headache for a couple years, but it'll be nice when that's finished that Freehill Business Park will be 2 right turns.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Do we turn it over to Jesse now? How should we proceed?
That's probably the best
Mayor?
thing. I'll stick around. I'm going to finish my dinner over here,
Okay,
but I won't go far.
thank you, Mayor. Mr. Eckenroth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 action items that are before you. We have staff reports that are prepared in the agenda. So we will go through those one by one, and then we will go on to verbal updates afterwards. But we are really looking for some direction and some recommendations on these 5 action items. For item A, which is GNRC funding, I'm going to have Ms. Locke come up and give us an introduction to that item.
Let me say too, before Ms. Locke, you begin, that we're pleased tonight to have Alderman Jim Waters and Rachel Collins. So they're here with us, and please, if you have questions, and at the appropriate time, please get my attention, and we'd be glad to hear you. Ms. Locke.
Thank you. So yes, we're needing to discuss GNRC funding priorities and have some direction to staff on that. We in GNRC approached city staff in preparation for the next TIP cycle, which is fiscal years 24 through 27, and recognizing the increased construction costs across the board, inquired as to what our increased needs were for funding. And so we shared those needs and discussed those. And in looking at that, it was recommended that we prioritize some of our projects to look at those that are close to construction or at construction and what those funding needs are, and kind of prioritize those against those that are maybe much earlier in the process and may not need the funding as urgently, and to possibly shift some of those projects from the current TIP or upcoming TIP to the next TIP, which is fiscal year 28 through 31. And so that is what we have before us. We currently have 9 projects that are in the TIP. We have 4 that are either at construction or in right-of-way and close to construction. And so those are the 4 that we're kind of highlighting the funding needs on. And those are the top 4 listed in the attachment. That's the Lake Synchronization Project, the Sanders Ferry Drakes Creek Bike Trail, the Walton Ferry Old Shackle Realignment, and the Drakes Creek Stop 30 widening. And there are reflected in there some estimated start dates for construction. And then we have the estimated remaining project cost, the current federal dollars associated that is in the current TIP, and then the outstanding city cost with no additional funding considered. So in discussions with them, for those top 4 projects that are closer to construction with more immediate needs, there was discussion that it may be a viable option to obtain additional funding to cover some of that shortfall if we were to prioritize some of our projects.
So, in other words, if we prioritize and move a couple down, we might get more money for our top priority projects.
Yes, sir. That's
Is what
correct.
it is.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And so the top four, is that the one that we need to move up in priority according to the staff because we've already got work done and they're closer to finish?
That's correct, yes. Yes, we have the least amount of funds invested in those projects. I mean, the most amount of funds invested in those top four projects already. And those are the four that are closest to completion. And so as far as the GNRC is concerned, that those would be the top candidates for additional funding as well because they are closer to completion.
And of course, the fire department's not in there because they're not capable of GNRC funding.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And you'll notice the Saundersville Interchange project is also not listed. That is currently the only funding associated with that is the state LIC funds. So that's not managed through the GNRC.
Questions?
Mhm.
Please.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for
welcome.
the update. On your estimated start date, is that the estimated construction date, that when construction will commence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I see the summer of 2022. I mean, we're several months away from that
Yes.
on those first two,
Yes.
and about a year away from the other one in the old Shackle and Walton Ferry realignment.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I've got some questions, some general questions. So if we do this reprioritizing,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean on those top four projects, we're likely to get more money and less city cost?
Yes.
So the outstanding city cost, if we take this strategy,
Mm-hmm.
should be reduced,
Yes, that's correct.
but we don't know how much.
We have an idea.
Okay.
Nothing is absolute today, but
Right.
based on our communications, it's anticipated that we would receive the funding needed for the light synchronization up to the 80-20 cap. So the city's responsibility for that project would decrease to approximately $400,000.
That's good news.
Yes.
Okay.
And the Sanders Ferry Drakes Creek project, they have indicated that that would be a top candidate for discretionary TAP funding of up to $1.5 million. So that would increase the federal share to approximately $4 million, and the city would only be responsible for approximately 1.4 million.
Okay.
The Walton Ferry Old Shackle project, the city has paid the 20% on the most recent total project estimate, which was just around $16 million. We've paid the 20% on that. The GNRC believes it's possible that we would receive the additional funding needed. The federal funding would be approximately $10.7 million in this next tip if we reprioritize some of our other projects.
So over and above what we've already spent on that project, it would be an additional what? The city portion.
Well, since we've paid the 20%, if the project cost stays the same, we would have no additional cost for that project if we receive this full amount from the GNRC through this next tip cycle. It's possible
That we wouldn't have any additional cost. That's
Yes.
assuming the construction costs, and we already know that CSX has increased the cost, haven't we? We already
Yes,
know that.
they did include that in the most recent
They did.
estimate. And
Okay.
yes, that's correct. So we've considered that, but it is still possible that the construction costs in that project may increase before we sign a contract.
So we don't know yet. And then the last one is the raising up of the flooded area in Stop 30 and Drake's Creek.
Yes, sir. That's right.
And what would that be reduced to from the 2 million city portion?
Would be estimated our share would be 800,000.
800, okay. And were any of these projects in the budget? Do you know?
They are in the budget. Yes, they are.
At these reduced amounts or at the larger amounts?
Well, for the lake synchronization, it is in the budget at the project cost for construction, the 1.7 million. And that is because in order to sign a contract for construction, we have to have the full funding for that phase. And so we will be reimbursed as we proceed, through that phase. As we pay invoices, then we'll seek reimbursement. But that full amount is in the budget.
Okay. And the Sanders Ferry bike trail?
The Sanders Ferry, believe we are, I believe that we were asking for the amount for the construction costs that we just received bids on, but they were a little higher than anticipated. So we will have an additional cost for the CEI, the construction engineering inspection, and that's estimated to be approximately another 400,000 to 500,000. We're working on securing that.
And I guess that's true, I guess that's true in each of these, on each of these projects, that they're going to significantly decrease, which may save in our budget if we budgeted for more than those dollars.
Yes.
Possible.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Or, Steve?
Make sure I understand this correctly. Moving Rockland Road, Indian Lake widening, Main Street sidewalks. Is the 949 federal funding, is that already here, there, in the bank?
That was a new project. That was the multimodal project that we were awarded. And that is a 95-5 split. So yes, that is in the tip. And I apologize, those actually are not in a prioritization order below the first four. I believe that we would still anticipate, should the committee agree and direct staff as such, to move forward with the Main Street and streetlight LED conversion. As of now, we do not believe that we need any additional funding other than the 5% for that multimodal.
So we would just absorb the $50,000,
The 50,000?
49,960.
Yes,
We
sir.
would absorb that.
Yes.
Streetlights basically already done. Signal timing optimization program is hopefully it's paid for. We just got to do it.
Yes, just move through the process.
So here's my question. In this prioritization level here, when it says estimated start dates 2026, the way I read this, that the new plan will affect 28 through 31. So this 2026 is really a 2028 or later.
That would be extended should the priorities be assigned
Okay,
that
so
way, yes.
Rockland Road and Indian Lake Road actually would be a 2028 or later start date, not a 2026.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
So if we move Indian Lake widening down, is it possible that we would schedule that for paving? I've noticed there are some spots on Indian Lake that are pretty rough.
Either
So,
paving or repair, yes, sir.
Paving or repair.
Yes, sir.
Okay, to get us to the 28. or
Yes, sir.
beyond. Okay.
Certainly.
So really, we're only reprioritizing the Indian Lake and the Rockland Road. Is that correct? Those two projects alone?
That would be my recommendation, simply based on the amount of money that would provide to possibly fund our other more immediate needs.
Have we received a bid on light synchronization?
Not yet. I did receive verbal confirmation today that we are receiving concurrence from TDOT with the bid documents, with minor comments that we can address and then put it out to bid. So we'll be working through that this week.
So do our aldermen in the audience have any questions?
I have some.
Oh, okay, Arlen.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
The Walton Ferry Old Shackle Island realignment, You mentioned that we already had allocated 20%. Either we have either written them a check, spent it, or we have that in the budget.
Yes, ma'am.
So that would be about $3.3 million. Is that right?
Total over the
Total.
years, yes.
Yeah, because at one point we did, I mean, years and years ago, it was, I think, 1.2, 1.3 million
Something
in that
like that.
category for the right-of-way part of it. And then the other part is for the construction.
Yes.
So we don't have to make any further allocations for that project because we're going to get the funding from the Gnrc
Hopefully.
and okay, when will we know that? That was my question because we're less than, about a year away from that right now.
I think that we will know something in the coming next few months because they're going through that process now of evaluating all of the municipalities' needs and making recommendations to their internal committees.
And they're working closely
funding.
with the with the railroad? They're negotiating with the railroad or are we, or a combination of all three?
TDOT is negotiating with CSX for the Walton Ferry Old Shackle project.
Okay,
As far as us receiving additional funding for the shortfall that we see here, that would be through the GNRC.
okay.
Yeah.
So soon, I guess you'll be the point person that would be notified about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you could,
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll let us know,
I will.
because that's good news.
I will. I like to share good news.
Those are all the questions that I have about those projects.
Uh,
Thank you, Chairman.
Alderman Waters, Alderman Collins, okay. So these dates, these estimated start dates, if we take this action tonight and reprioritize, will you raise your right hand and swear that they will be accurate and true? That
No,
we'll
sir.
start on these dates.
If I could list some caveats.
All right, well, we know the staff will work expeditiously.
We will.
So I guess we need a motion, committee. Okay.
Sure.
On the Rockland Road, the widening and extension, and we're still talking about the extension going from Rockland Road over to South
Center Point.
Center Point Road, right?
Yes.
And all in the back area.
Mm-hmm.
Do we own that land now, or would it have to be right away?
We do not own that
Does
land currently.
Goodlettsville still own that land?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure who the current owner is. Oh,
So there's 4 pieces of property over there. Goodlettsville does still own one of them, and the reason I know this is because we've had somebody come forward that's looking at building something over there, and we've spent an awful lot of time on this recently. Goodlettsville still owns it. We have the first right of refusal on their piece of land, but with somebody else interested with the land that is part of the future expected right-of-way, we let them know that we expect them to provide that road if they develop that piece of property. So, maybe 20% of it will be built by somebody else in the next couple of years.
Okay.
So-
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That was my question. Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman.
And if we vote tonight to reprioritize, that doesn't mean that we can't add projects for 28 through 31, correct?
that's right. Yes.
We can still, if new needs come up, we can still add them to Rockland and Indian Lake.
We can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, committee, if we're ready, I think we're ready for a motion if someone has one.
Well, I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
that we prioritize the first 4 items and that we move Rockland Road and Indian Lake widening to the 2028 schedule. And we still stay on the timeline for the signal timing optimization, the Main Street sidewalk improvement, and the street light LED conversion project, as is.
Good.
And that's my motion.
That's a good motion. Do we have a second? Yes. We have a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's unanimous. So, great job, Ms.
Thank you.
Locke.
Thank you.
So next Mr. Eckenroth, now we have a discussion of other projects, and the fire hall is one of those. That's the first one, I think, on the list.
Yes, sir. So we recently got bids back in on Fire Hall number 7. So we issued bonds, I think 2 or 3 years ago. We have, or a capital outlay note, excuse me. So we have approximately 2.5 million available on a capital outlay note. We budgeted in the draft fiscal year 23 budget 1.45 million. So that leaves us with, if we include the draft fiscal year 23 budget, with an available balance of 3.9 million. The fire hall bids, which are attached, came in at a base bid of 4.875 with an alternate of 395 if we add a third bay, all the way up to a high bid of 5,548, so 5,548,000 for a base bid, so that's 2 bays, with an additional 402 for the alternate for bay number 3. So prices range from 5.2 million all the way up to $6,136,000. So, you know, at this point, we don't have that full amount of money in the budget. So, really wanted to get some direction on some advice from the Capital Projects Committee on this project, if we want to move it forward, and if we want to fund the project, and just to talk through those options.
So this price of 5.2 million is with 3 bays. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I talked to Alderman Hayes this afternoon. He discussed this with the chairman of the county budget committee, Chris Taylor. And Mr. Taylor said that the door is not closed on the county helping the city with this fire hall. Of course, he can't, as one commissioner, he can't give any assurance. But I think his statement, and I want to be very careful, that there would be some money in the budget, this next year's county budget, for this. I don't know how much, but Alderman Hayes said that the door's not shut, which to me is good news. I mean, we're in the middle of an election, so to me, just that statement is good news. So, I'm trying to wonder about the timing of this. How long is the bid good for? When's the deadline of the bid?
So we had 45 days, so I believe we have about 30 plus days left on this, so approximately a month.
30 plus days. So that would be after the county has their budget, I believe, after they pass their budget. So we would know before the 30 days. Does anybody know when the county does their budget? Chief Bush, do you know?
I do not know when they do the budget, no, sir.
Yeah,
I know that the deadline for the contract is May 20th for the current price.
May the 20th.
Yes, sir.
So, and if we lose that date, does that mean we have to rebid it all over again?
So the contractors are only required to hold that bid for 45 days, so that is a real possibility.
Because of costs going up.
Yes, sir. Typically, it's a 60-day hold, but because of volatile costs, 45 days was put on this, and some contractors even were complaining about a 45-day hold on the prices.
I guess where I'm coming from, I would love for there to be a 3-bay fire station out there providing ambulance service, because it would be closer to the population. But if the county doesn't help, and they're going to keep the ambulance service at the volunteer, which it's their discretion if they choose to, I need to be convinced that we need to go with the 3-bay fire station if we're not going to have ambulance service out of that station. So I don't know if there's anybody that wants to talk about, you know, the rationale, since we don't know yet what the county's going to do to go from, how much would we save if we just did a 2-bay?
4.8.
So the additional
Yeah,
cost is
4.8. Yes.
400,000.
We would save 400,000 by,
Yes, sir.
by just making it a 2-bay.
Yes, sir.
And Chief Bush, what's going to be in the 2-bay? Come up here. Let me if that's okay, Mr. Eckenroth. Tell me what the two bays will be. I know we bought a fire engine, an
Correct.
engine.
So depending on if EMS moves, the county ambulance service moves an ambulance out there, it would house an engine company and an ambulance. If they do not, we'll have that open bay. We need the storage space. We have apparatus now. Our reserve engine sits at Station 4. Eventually, we're going to have to discuss at some point, 2 or 3 years down the road, potentially replacing one of our truck companies. That would be a place that we would store our next truck company. We would move our, if EMS chooses not to go out there, we have the option to move our heavy rescue truck out there, which is right on top of the bypass. So we could fill the space up pretty quick. It's, when I took over chief 7 years ago, we were finishing up the bay at Station 5. And this has been 7 years ago, and it cost us close to $600,000 because we waited to add, and that was a half a bay. That's not even a full-length bay. To me, the space is needed for storage and or for potential growth. And I just think right now with the pricing the way it is, as much as things have gone up, it's a perfect time to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I guess my concern is we have to pay for it. And it's a lot more than the bond than we thought. So I'm just trying to look at, would there be any harm in waiting until near the close of the bid process to make a decision on this so that maybe we can get some input from the county on this? Or does it, I guess I'm asking the committee members, does it matter if the county participates in this or not? Anybody?
At this point, Mr. Chairman, at this point, I think we need to look at worst-case scenario, that we fund it with city funds 100%. And then if we get we need to do this one way or the other. Right now, we're trying to decide which one to do.
2 or 3 bays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Plan A or Plan B.
Yes. Yeah.
Question about the ambulance service, because it's really important. If volunteer fire, what is that called?
Shackle Island.
Shackle Island Fire Department. If they are supplying the ambulance service, does that mean the ambulance people are there on site? Or do they have to come from another location, go there, get the ambulance, and then go?
So Shackle Island does not provide for the ambulance service. That's a county. They fall under the county jurisdiction, but that ambulance is staffed 24 hours.
So the response time is
Accurate for that area for that particular ambulance. Right now, we have 3 in the city that cover the entire city limits. So that could possibly mean that the ambulance at Station 5 would cover the Durham Farms area now. If they're busy, then they potentially bring the one from Shackle Island out. When we started all this 2 or 3 years ago, I asked the EMS director to look at it to see if it valued putting another ambulance in service to bring a benefit to the community and or the outlying areas, because what happens is now you have a lot of lag time where there's ambulances out of the city and we have a delayed response and or transport time for people in the community because the ambulances are all tied up.
okay. What is the response time from Station 5 to Autumn Creek, Durham Farms?
9.5, 10 minutes.
That's unacceptable.
I've had it anywhere. We've done a random study for a year from anywhere from 9.5 minutes to 12 minutes to Carly Close East, which is the back end of Fountain Brook.
Okay, what would the response time be from Volunteer to Durham Farms, Autumn Creek?
The volunteer fire department? Or are you
No,
talking
Volunteer Park.
about? Oh, it would be at least half of that. We'd cut
So
it to
4 minutes, 5
4.5
minutes?
minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I rest my case on that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm all for it.
Thank you. Only because I had personal experience with that with my sister.
Yeah.
Who lives in Autumn Creek.
Yeah.
And it was long.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I experienced it personally. It took almost 9 minutes when I needed it.
Chairman,
Please.
So you had
Chair-
personal experience?
Yes. Yeah.
Chairman, you asked a question I'd like to address. You asked about what the downside would be delaying a decision until 45 days is expired, or at 45 days. And talking with Jesse, the only thing I could imagine that would be a downside is theoretically somebody could withdraw their bid. we don't anticipate that happening, but that happened when we went out for bids for recycling a couple years ago. And we had a bid and that person withdrew their bid before we could make a decision. I don't see a downside other than that. I don't think that's going to happen for something of this size.
I guess, I'm wondering what puts the city in the best negotiation with the county to go ahead and fund it and to make the statement that we're going to fund three bays, or make the statement, we're going to fund 2 bays and we want the county to help on the third. So I guess I'm thinking, what's the best way to make that argument to the county?
I would say B.
Pardon me?
I would say option B.
Yeah, the 2 bays, and say, hey, please help us with the 3rd bay.
Thank you.
Yes, Alderman Collins.
Thank you. I have spoken with a few county commissioners who may or may not be there after the election, but my understanding is that it is not likely that they are going to give us a lump sum. What they are interested in doing is essentially paying rent for an ambulance bay that we build and own.
Well, you
And
represent part of this.
Of course, we
Yeah,
would get none if we don't have a bay.
right.
This is a very difficult decision, but I would just, we are going to grow. Are we going to grow? Yes, we're going to grow. That's all this city has ever done in its 50+ years is grow. And being prepared for that growth by having a 3rd bay before construction costs go up makes sense to me. We would have to consult with staff and try to figure out the best ways to pay for it. Of course, it's more complicated than just, do we want it? Yes, we want it. But I don't believe that we will get a lump sum from the county.
Okay.
That's my personal take on the conversations that I have had. But what we can tell is that everybody's getting a lot of different information about what they think the county may or may not do. So relying on any of it seems,
It is. It's,
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I also would like to comment too. Just keep in mind, if we do a 2 bay and then in several years from now decide to do another bay, right now, an additional bay for the 3rd bay would be about $400,000 difference. Now, almost 10 years ago, that 3rd bay on Firehouse 5, this was 10 years ago almost, cost us an additional $650,000. So it could realistically be a lot more than that if we decide in a few years, because of the growth, because that area, I mean, that's your area, that's growing like wildfire out there. And I'm concerned with the cost, yes, but more concerned with the response time for that area and the safety of the citizens of that area. So, I mean, what is a life worth? I say we go for the 3 bays. That's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah,
Comments?
yeah. Oh, I think our last meeting we talked about this, and I made this same statement, and I'm gonna make it again, that I would love to see the county pay for all of it, a piece of it, a small portion of it. But the fact is, we don't know what the county's gonna do. We've been talking to the county in conversations and letters for over 2 years. And, I know the mayor, Chief Bush, myself, Mr. Eckenroth, other aldermen have had conversations with, started to say candidates, but I guess that's the right terminology right now with those folks that are county commissioner on in candidacy. We will know nothing until the election's over, and I would imagine that we won't know anything right after that, because if you get a new county commission, it's pretty hard for new commissioners and or new aldermen, which seat that I've sat in before, to vote on spending that much money right out of the chute. So, that being said, the county commission does try to approve their budget, but you can go back a few years, and I just confirmed that to make sure that was true. It can go well into June before it gets approved, but it has to be done by the same time NAR does, by the end of June. That has to be done. So, that being said, I don't think we wait to see what the county does for us. I think we are a city that is in reasonably financially good shape right now and can afford to pay our own bills, including the expense on this fire hall if we have to. We have 2.5 million roughly that we have in a bond. We have committed, we haven't voted on it, but we have committed 1.45 million in this year's coming budget. So that would actually we need to look at another 1.28 million to accomplish our task. All that doesn't come out of the bank the first day or the second day or probably within 12 months. But we do have to show in good faith that the money's there. We have a bid that there's no doubt in my mind that will go up if we go past that May 20th date. I mean, it's just, buy a house right now, build something right now. I spent $24 on a 1x10x6 the other day. And I had to buy 4 of them because I made some shelves for a closet, but I like to choke when I spent that much money for a 1x10x6. So, that being said, I would say that we move forward. We have to have an ordinance to appropriate this money to make sure it's stuck in the bank. So those folks that have bid will know it's there. So whatever that number figures out to be, 2,273,000 and some odd pennies, I would move that this board approves for Mr. Bradley to write that ordinance and run it through the finance committee so we can make sure that we've got this bid nailed down by May the 20th. And that would be a motion that I make before this committee right now. I would also say outside that motion that I still hope the county would participate in some way, shape, or form. I don't think we do not pursue that. I think we'll know better whether and how to pursue that here in less than a month. You know, you have 24 people that vote on that. You have to have a majority, and 15 of those may be different faces. Then they're not going to vote on that right away, I could tell you. So that would be my motion, that we have Mr. Bradley pen an ordinance to, I'm not sure what the exact penning will be, that had come from Robert, but roughly $2.75 million to be before Finance Committee this month.
I second it, but I'd like a discussion.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I just, okay. Alderman Brown, are you looking at plan the two bay or the 3-bay with that motion?
I believe that looks at the 3-day.
Okay.
That's the numbers here.
Okay,
So that's
then
what
I
I'm going by.
definitely second that, yeah.
Is that not correct? Mr.
That is correct. That's the
That's
3-bay.
correct. That's the 3-day.
The 2.57.
And I totally agree with you that we can't, you know, we're an entity, we're a city. We have, thanks to our, you know, to Jesse and others, that we're able to make this decision and have the funding to do it. My concern is the ambulance service, and that is so important. I mean, the other is important too, the fire and all, but I think the response time is extremely important to our city because that area is growing like leaps and bounds, and it would be a different story if we didn't have the funding in place to be able to do it, but we do. Thank you.
And I have a question for Jesse on this. So with the motion and the second, do you believe that we can find the funding for this for this project at the increased cost?
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Any other questions?
I've got another, statement to my motion, I guess.
Okay.
I want to agree with Alderman Cunningham about response times and so on and so forth. I have several friends that live out in Durham Farms that have called to please, whatever you do, try to get the fire hall closer. None of them have ever been in a situation that they need the fire department that quick, but they have read and seen chatter, Facebook, text, Twitter, and their interest has been perked. So on their behalf, I would ask that we move this forward, and especially since we have been told we can pay for it. Thanks.
Yeah, and before the vote, I'd just like to say that in living in that area, I also have had a lot of constituents ask about it. There is a concern of the response time, and I've felt it personally. So I'm all for this project. I'm glad that we were able to put it on city property. I think that was a savings that we had by putting it on property that we already own. We didn't have to purchase the property. I don't believe there's going to be a lot of site preparation because it's pretty flat land. It's right by the school and can provide service to the school if they need it. And so I'm 100% in favor of this. And now that we have the assurance that staff believes they can find the money to fund this, we're ready for a vote.
One more
okay.
thing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the calendar, comes before finance, that ordinance needs to be written up ASAP, so it's ready for when we publicize our finance meeting, which will be the 26th. So at the finance meeting, I'm going to recommend that we put it before the full BOMA on the 26th, and then 2 weeks after that will be this second reading, which will be May 10th. Because if we wait any longer, we're going to be past the date, okay? So just so that everybody understands that. And I'd like to be a sponsor on that.
So
And I don't know if anybody else, and the chairman,
I'd say make all the committee,
the
those that
committee
are
would be
here.
the
Yeah.
co-sponsors on that.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm ready to vote. Yes. Oh, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Mayor,
I
did you
didn't-
have a comment?
I would like to tell you, I've already requested that to be written. However, I don't have a good enough memory to tell you that for sure. I think I have. But I will, regardless if I've asked to be written, I will go ahead and put it on the agenda with a caveat for the board meeting that make sure that everybody acknowledges that we're waiving the 2-week rule.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, committee. So we've taken action there. Mr. Ekenroth, next. Vote on the final. We have a motion by Alderman Brown, a second by Alderman Cunningham, and all of us have asked to be put as sponsors. We have a timetable for moving toward approval of the ordinance. So all those in favor of the motion and second, please say aye.
Aye.
And oppose, it's unanimous in favor. So good action.
Thank you, board.
Thank you. Next.
All right. That was a serious item. We have an item that's a little more fun. So pickleball is currently one of the fastest growing sports in America. We do not have pickleball courts in Hendersonville. We use the tennis courts and we go out there and we put temporary tape down and pickleball players go out there and play pickleball. So I have to say a big thank you to Andy and Alicia. They've worked very hard in giving us some concept plans for pickleball courts in some locations. So we had Kimley Horn go out and study 2 locations where we could place pickleball courts. One was at Memorial Park. So Jason, if you'd go down to the first drawing, if you could minimize that. So this drawing shows some additional parking at Memorial, and it shows a total of 8 courts that are out there with some walking trails, pavilions, and benches. There are a list of pros and cons for this location. There is a cost estimate on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I believe the cost estimate over here is about $1.25 million, as it's shown. And then if you go to the next concept, this just shows what could go behind those pickleball courts. It's just a concept rendering. If you go to the next slide, please, Jason. This shows another potential location over at next to Mary's Magical Place. So where the pickleball courts are shown is currently where the inline hockey rinks are being removed from. There's going to be a berm that's put up around Mary's Magical Place, and it's going to create like a 4-foot hole. So this is one location that can fit 8 courts, and then there's some additional parking that's kind of scattered throughout the parking lot based on some utilities that are running through there. So we have some restrictions on where we can put the parking. But what both plans do is they provide about the same amount of parking spaces. They both provide 8 courts. They both provide the pavilion and the benches. I think the cost over here is about $1.13 million, but it does not include an ADA sidewalk that we would have to build to get down to these courts. That would be after the project is completed. So with this location, there is a project that would be completed first, and that's that current flood protection project we have, and then pickleball could be built after that. So kind of what staff was looking for was some direction on which location Capital Projects Committee would think would serve the city best, and then talk about budget dollars after that. So we've budgeted approximately $1 million in the budget, and I did that to balance the budget so it doesn't include the full budget that's on these concept drawings, but there's some items that we could phase in, do at a later date, or we don't have to do it all. This is just concept drawings of what could be done at those locations.
I have a question. Veterans Park, what's the potential of them getting flooded then? I know you said there was going to be a berm and a 4-foot kind of trench.
Yeah, so that's one of the concerns with where those pickleball courts are placed is right now it gets flooded, and that's why the inline rinks are getting pulled out and moved. So yeah, the potential is there. We had these bid as concrete so that if it was flooded, it would not have the same type of effect as it would on an asphalt court, so the concrete's much more durable. But yeah, that's absolutely a concern. I don't know how often it floods over there. I haven't been here that long to see how often it floods over there, but that is a flood area.
What about Memorial Park? Is that a flood?
That is in a flood plain.
Right? And the other one's flood zone?
I don't think it floods as much over there. I was talking to Mr. Gilly about how often it floods, and it's very seldom I think that water ever gets up in those areas.
That just scares me to death. Would this be covered by insurance, so if it did flood?
So at this location,
At Veterans Park, Veterans.
At Veterans, I currently, PEP denied us any further coverage for the inline rinks. That's one of the reasons I think they are moved. So I don't know that they would cover us
I would be
over here.
interested to know if they would be covered if we did those, once we did those improvements with the berm and the 4-foot
Well,
trench.
the berm would stop the berm is designed to slow down the velocity of the water and protect Mary's Magical Place, but it does not impede the water that would potentially be on top of those pickleball courts. So you would basically have
consideration. Yeah, that might be something we might.
the speed of the water wouldn't be basically the berm acts like a big speed bump. So it's there to slow the water down. With the slower velocity water, you're not going to have the type of erosion that you would have with fast moving water, but you're still going to have flooding at that location.
That's the concern though I would have on both, especially in Veterans. Thank you.
I have a question. I originally was in favor of it being by Mary's Magical Place, but as I've looked at this more, I've come to change my mind, and part of my changing of my mind depended upon this may delay the approval of the berm. Because we may have to go back and refile it with, is it FEMA? We may have to go back and refile it with FEMA, which could be another year, 2 years delay on this. So that to me is a factor. Also, the fact that I would doubt it would be insured, and it would actually be lower in the ground than the inline hockey rinks, correct?
4 feet lower.
4 feet lower. So it will have even a greater tendency to flood than exists today. So I do have some questions about the at Memorial Park. How many parking spots have they outlined here in this bid? 124. And I think pickleball has a total of, let's see, 4 people playing per court. So that's a doubles, that's considered doubles. So 4 times, let's see, we've got 8 courts would be 32 if everyone drove themselves. So I'm trying to understand the rationale for over 100 parking spots, because that increased the cost when the maximum for pickleball would only be 32 cars. So, yeah, unless you have tournaments. Yeah, they don't.
The reason why that we asked to put the additional parking is, number one, that parking lot is already full on most normal good weather days. The one that's there now. So this expands that parking lot that we currently have. When you talk about pickleball, one of the reasons why we're looking at 8 courts is to bring in tournaments and events. So you're talking about not just resident playing against resident at that point. You're talking about people playing against people with spectators. So when you talk about adding events and planning for future growth, I think that's where we got to the area for parking that you're looking at on your page.
Yeah, and
Specific number, it's just what probably fits well. And when you talk about the Memorial Park site, the drainage issue that is there is right where the current parking lot is, as you know. We just had to make adjustments to that when we repaved it back there. So there'll be some work to have to be done to get drainage out of that little low-lying area between the parking lot and the current lacrosse field that is there.
well, I would like to see some.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but keep in mind too, this is a concept. This is not a hardcore design.
Yeah, and let me explain to you, Mr. Gilly, where I'm at. I've looked at all the documents here, and as you know, the bathrooms at the rugby park are significantly higher than we planned for. So I can't in good conscience pay for a Cadillac here when we don't even have bathrooms or parking lot. I mean, we've got gravels. At rugby, there seems to be no equity there. So that's why I would like to see this facility, and I'm for it, phased in, and not all, lock and key job, but maybe half of that for parking. Maybe not put lights on it at this time and phase them in next year or the following year when we can afford it, because I want to save enough money in the budget so we can be able to pay for restrooms at the rugby field. So I guess it's competing interest.
I totally understand. I mean, I feel like our job was to bring you all concepts and information and let you know what things were looking like. I'm not going to be up here and be a cheerleader for one over the other.
Yeah.
I'm trying to split the baby in half either.
Yeah.
I think our job was to bring you this information. The one thing I would say about lights is I would say that the vast majority of pickleball players are coming after work. And the time of day that they're going to play, unless it's on Sunday afternoon or Saturday morning, is going to require lights. That would be there are people that play during the day, during the week.
And I've talked to a few people, and they say these are retired people pretty much, and that they play during the day. It's what I've talked to several people, that play pickleball. So the lights didn't mean that much to them.
It did to the very passionate group of 6 residents that came and met with me and the mayor and Jesse about it.
Yeah.
Those were not retired people.
And I'm not saying that we don't need lights. I'm just saying let's phase them in.
This is up to you all for sure.
Yeah. So, Mr. Eckenroth, how could we save money on this? If we cut the parking lot in half, and instead of over 100 parking spots, have just, say, around 50, if we postpone the lights for a year, we could bring it in around 800 or a little less than 800,000 maybe, and the pavilion as well.
Yeah, I think so. Again, these are concept drawings. This is probably, we'd say if we were going to build pretty ideal scenario, this is it, right? It's landscaped, it's got a pavilion, benches, it's very nice. We can go back and look at ways to reduce some of these costs here. I think we probably could phase the parking lot in. Lights are not, we could obviously phase lights in. A pavilion is not, I don't think during the first year going to be critical for pickleball play. So if we're trying to do more than just this project, there's ways that we can go back, look at it, and cut costs down to, get around probably the 800,000 if that's the mark that Capital Projects Committee wants to shoot for. We can look for ways to get there. I don't know exact dollars, but I think there's some value engineering we could do on these plans to reduce some of the costs.
I just want to make sure that we can spread the money around to other projects that are important as well, to the community. So I don't have the wisdom of Solomon either, but I would like to see some different scenarios of different costs and what we would give up, and maybe with the commitment of phasing these in, start out small and then grow.
Sure, and maybe the best approach for us is to talk to a contractor on cost savings approaches if we phase it in, and we can determine where really cost savings is at for a phased approach.
Comment?
Yeah.
Steve?
Thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Gilly a question, and I would like to hear from our consultant. She would come to the podium. First question would be for Mr. Gilly. The pickleball was identified as one of the amenities that would enhance the city park system. In categorizing 1 through 10, where was pickleball, and what have we decided to do pickleball over something that was above it in categorization?
I mean, when you look at the wants and needs of our park system, pickleball is on the list of things that residents want. There's no question about that. It's not something where tennis and pickleball really coexist very well. Many communities around us are building pickleball courts. Are there things that we could do that could benefit more residents or bring in more people? If you want to talk about turf field facilities, or, we have several things. Yes, but is pickleball on the list of things that when we did our master plan, it's on there for sure. That answers your question.
Yeah, pretty well.
Again, I don't want to be up here trying to split the baby in half. I can.
Well, yeah, you're in the top 5 here, restrooms, pickleball, so.
Sure, and there are
We
things
don't necessarily want you to
there's
choose.
things that we've requested in budgets for the last 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
that have gotten cut out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you've been around this game long enough, you know how that happens.
Sure.
You sit in this chair up here. To our consultant.
Yes, sir.
It says here that both concept plans feature a total of 8 pickleball courts. Kimney Horn has provided a list of pros and cons. So I want to hear your pros and your cons of Memorial Park. I think we've already figured out the cons at the other facility. We don't really necessarily want that to become a swimming pool.
No.
We want a pickleball court, 4-foot swimming pool is, So what about Memorial Park?
Please identify yourself.
Sure. Alicia Ely with Kimley Horn. I appreciate the question. So starting with pros at Memorial Park, I think
If you really want to do the other one too, I'll listen to that, but you know?
Okay. I would say Memorial right now, it being the lacrosse field, it's pretty flat. There's not going to be a lot of grading required or site work required for that. A pro would be that the parking is all right there in one piece, where at Veterans we were having to find, in order to locate the same number of spots, we're having to go into multiple different locations that were further away, where folks would have to walk further. I would say a big one that someone hit on was the timing. I think it was you, Mr. Robertson, about we'd have to wait for FEMA to approve. I spoke with Michael Black at Lowe's, who's heading up that effort, and we'd essentially have to wait for FEMA to approve. And he said that could be another 12 or 18 months for the berm to be approved, and then for that construction to occur and to be finished before we could begin design or implementation of pickleball courts. So it's not going to be a quick process at Veterans, whereas Memorial, would be ready to start it at any point there. I think phasing wise, again, if we're choosing to phase this, Memorial is conducive to that. You could build a couple easily and grow. That second concept we just showed that there was even more room to grow other amenities, or if pickleball really was a hit there and the desire was to build more courts, there's even more room for expansion on that south end of the field. So I think those are some of the highlights. Maybe one of the cons, I know there are some residential areas nearby the lacrosse field currently. We did speak with the lighting rep, who's already done a study when we were looking at lacrosse field lights there. They're not very concerned with technology and LED these days with much overcast lighting, but there could be concern with potential lighting or noise concerns at Memorial with the residential adjacency there. So I'd say those are the main pros and cons on Memorial.
Sound like more pros than cons.
I do believe so. I do believe so. Again, I'm not a civil engineer, but in talking with Michael on the veteran site, I would have concern about the flooding and the velocity there with the water and potential. There's not a lot of structure to a pickleball court, but there are fencing and netting that I think would have to be ultimately replaced much sooner than at Memorial. So the long-term cost, I think, would be higher at Veterans than Memorial.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure who this question needs to be directed to, but I had to take a big gulp when I saw $1.2 million for pickleball.
Yeah.
A big gulp. It was mentioned about phasing. And I know Andy kind of focuses on the tournament, so bring revenue into the city and that sort of thing. And that was the big reason why we did two covered inline hockey rinks, because one would not make any sense. If we're just going to do one, we don't even need to have them covered, etc. So the pickleball, if we phase in 4 courts and did half of the parking lot, I mean, I'm interested in the phasing. I mean, would that even make sense to do that instead of doing all 8 at the same time?
I'm not opposed to anything at all.
I mean,
when
would
you
it
talk
make
about
sense
phasing,
though? Yeah.
what I can't answer, and I don't know who here could at this meeting today. I don't know if maybe even Sarah, if she was here. When it comes to phasing in a parking lot, what that looks like as far as design and construction of it. That I can't answer that. Obviously, you could build.
What about the courts?
The courts themselves, obviously, just by looking at the concept, you could build the first 4, and I think come back in later and add whatever you wanted to. I don't know how that works with what we have current parking, connecting that and doing that whole plan. And connectivity with ADA and sidewalks and all that goes with once you start putting all those things in place. That would be my uneducated parking lot phase answer.
Okay, I mean, I'm not opposed to doing the project,
Right.
but, I mean, like I said, we don't have any bathroom facilities at the rugby area.
I'm well
and then we're-
aware, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we're just
We
trying to.
don't have
I
bathroom
think this
facilities
committee
at
is just,
rugby.
yeah, I think this committee is just trying to prioritize.
We lost a tournament today to Smyrna to turf baseball fields for this coming weekend.
For rugby?
No, for baseball.
And then, yeah, and the
I
turf.
mean, we have
yes.
several things that, I mean, we're to the point where we're getting to prioritize at, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, maybe we were prioritizing wants, but at this point, we're getting to where we're prioritizing needs at some point too.
So, I mean, I'd like to see what the phasing program might look like. I don't know if we need to make a motion on that and then come back with that, and
give-
take a look at that, or what?
Give me some scenarios on I like the idea of looking at 4 courts versus 8, so we can, and maybe half of the parking lot, instead of 150, do a half parking lot, no lights, but run the electricity to have them ready. What else are there things that we could phase in, Andy, on that?
I mean, I think, I'm trying to think on the fly here. I'm really thinking that maybe if you're wanting to do phasing, that needs to come from us in the form of when we put out the request for proposals and have different options that we would like to see people price. But to do that, we're going to probably need to know a dollar amount that you all are comfortable with. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah. it does.
also, with the diabetes grant we just voted to apply for, we turned that application in last week. I don't know, that application was for 8, I think. I don't know if it's, I don't know that would affect, if we got that grant, would we then be tied into 8? You see what I'm saying? We applied for $150,000 for next year for pickleball based on looking at what we were looking at as a city. I don't know that would matter. I want everybody to understand where we are on that.
Well, that brings up
But
another
she wrote the
question.
grant, so that may be a question she can help answer.
That brings up another question. We
Sure.
also applied for a $500,000 grant.
Correct.
And in that grant, we said we were going to put lights on this field, didn't we?
No, sir.
For lacrosse?
No, sir. We ended up changing those to lights for rugby because the Corps of Engineers lease was not long enough at Memorial Park.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all right. That's news to me. Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman, are you done?
No, go ahead.
Also, I'd like to see, what the, after we do how long will it take to build these things first? Do you have any timeline on that?
I mean,
Does it
obviously,
take 6 months?
first thing is we would have to wait for our new budget year to see
Okay.
what was actually,
Yeah, but the
approved.
construction, would it be,
after that, you got to bid and you got to hope that you got good weather. I mean, you're locked, I would say at least 6 months to 12 months.
okay.
I
So
feel
let's,
comfortable about that.
I mean, I would be comfortable with the 4 and then get the feedback and see what the feedback from the community is. And then if we have to rush and do another 4 and get that going, to keep the momentum going, then let's do that.
I'm
I mean,
great.
what do you think?
I like it.
We are here to give you information
Yeah.
to make an educated and, as we can, informed decision. So that was,
Because we're paying as we
I mean,
go, so
I
we're
would
not borrowing
also-
any money to do this.
I would like to hear the mayor's thought on it too. Because this is
Okay.
something that we've met with him several times and
Yeah.
members of the community.
Okay,
Not to
thank
put you on
you,
the spot.
thank you.
I would agree with everything that Andy said, and I think it's very reasonable to talk about phasing this in. I suspect that if we build 4, we're gonna have a lot of people saying you didn't build enough, but we'll find out. We'll find out if the appetite is there for more than 4. I think there are ways that we could trim some costs. I just told Jesse, said, why don't we get together after a staff meeting with Andy and talk about those possibilities. And I think it was a good idea also to call somebody in the construction business to find out, what are we missing here? What are some obvious, what are some glaring errors in this concept? Even though it's a concept, I mean, certainly there's something that somebody could look at and say, this is what you need to make sure to do.
What do you think about, I mean, isn't it a risk in your opinion, to put it in Veterans Park? I know we have a lot more room there versus Memorial, but I mean, I'm so afraid that they're gonna get ruined there.
I think with concrete, we mitigate that risk an awful lot, but we also have Veterans Park 'cause we have wide open space.
I know, we have a lot
Wide
of
open,
room
and we also
there.
have lights that are already there. I'm sort of like Alderman Robertson. I was absolutely firm that Veterans Park was a perfect place for it. But as I look at the expenses and I look at the concept plans, I think Memorial Park might be better.
Yeah,
So I'm sort of torn on both those at this point.
okay, thank you, Mayor.
So, yeah, something for me.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm still a little bit worried about whether our insurance carrier would cover, pickleball courts there, since they will not cover the inline hockey rink if it's washed out again, so.
We need to keep in mind that PEP is not the only insurance carrier out there that we could ask about it.
That's true.
Yeah, PEP, there's no way they're going to cover it. I would say at 95% sure they're not going to cover it, but somebody else might. However, there's going to be a cost to cover something that has a history of flooding.
This is probably a question for you and Jesse. We're down to talking dollars and cents now, down to splitting a side of beef. You pay for part of it and I'll pay for part of it. That's probably a country boy example, but that's the way it works. So we're gonna split the side of beef, put 4 pickleball courts in instead of 8. And it'll cost us probably a little bit more than half the money, because usually when your machinery's out there and the bodies are out there and they're working, you can probably figure the lower half will be 65% of the bill, and the upper half will be about 35% of the bill. So if you're looking at dollars and cents as a whole, I think you have to look at that a little bit. Of phasing sounds good, but it will cost us more money if we have to do that second phase. And it sounds like we might have to do that. Now here's the elephant in the room that we've already committed. At least us 3 have committed to a fire hall. And you go down the list that our Public Works Director presented a while ago, and we agreed on priorities there. You're looking at a lot of money. We don't have all that money. So are we considering bonding this year? Are we? And I think we probably are, would be my guess, because we have so much outlay here. And Jesse's ready to jump, so.
We've talked about
I think
that.
y'all know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Whether we do it all or we phase it in, so.
We've talked about it slightly, but we've also talked about is now we have an infrastructure reserve. I didn't anticipate using that the first year that it was there.
Yeah.
But I'm also, I don't think you're saying I don't think anybody would say use it all.
Yeah.
I think that might be something we could dip into. Is pickleball a good excuse to dip into our infrastructure reserve? Maybe. It's not the best reason, but it might be a reason. It might be something worthwhile. We've talked about just a little bit. Of course, you all know this. Interest rates have gone up. It's not free borrowing like it used to be, but it's still not awful.
Yeah. But it's still going, I think.
I would say the one difference from this year's budget too is we are counting on those ARPA funds to roll into the general fund. So we do have a healthier one-time bucket of money to pull from. And we have approximately 1.6 million in the infrastructure reserve too from last year's surplus. So between those two, we're having funds that we probably haven't had in the past, and ARPA funds don't expect to have them anytime in the future, but we will have them for next year.
Okay. I don't know the exact percentages on what I named a while ago, but I know if you do half of it now and half of it later, if you do it all together, it's going to cost you less money. I've been around long enough. I've had a couple houses remodeled and stuff, and put a couple things off that I wish I'd have done when I was asked to do it, and because it did cost me money, and the same things happened here. So I don't know. I'm all about saving money, and I really want to see some restrooms at the rugby facility. I think it would be important for me if I played rugby to have restrooms. And my wife, if she come to watch me play rugby, which that's not going to happen, but So, but I also think it's wise to think ahead a little bit too. And if we're gonna look down the road at 3 or 4 years and pickleball, people are overwhelming the city to build more courts and it's gonna cost us more money, then we're talking $600,000 and we've been talking millions here up till just a minute ago. Now we're talking 600. So, I don't know. I feel like we should, go for the whole side of beef personally. But I agree with you. I agree with you in part, but I look down the road, we're gonna have to spend that much money probably anyway. So, thank you. I don't know.
I have a question for Andy.
Yes, sir.
One of the cons against this facility, and maybe I can't really read it's so small, but one of the cons is that it's going to take up a field that we presently use for, what do we use, flag football, we use lacrosse?
It's mainly lacrosse.
And so
We do have some other people that will go over there for just community use, but mostly it is a lacrosse facility. If you move, I'll try to explain this the simplest I can. If Memorial Park is chosen for pickleball, the current plan that we've submitted to FEMA for the berm at Mary's Magical Place calls for that space that's where hockey was to be grass athletic field space and it'll be, we have lights there, it'll be used for practices, games. That would allow us to move lacrosse to Volunteer Park next to the hockey rinks where we currently have flag football, and put flag football in that space next to Mary's Magical Place.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
So no matter what happens here, if it's veterans, if it's Memorial, we're going to lose a potential field, if that makes sense.
It does. I just know that there've been some suggestions by people that were overusing some of our soccer fields, and if I just didn't want to put more demand on those fields because they need to rest every once in a while.
Yes, sir. This would not impact soccer.
All right. So I'm ready for. I've got a motion that I'll kick out, and we'll play with it and see if it makes sense. I'm going to bifurcate the motion, so it's going to be in 2 parts. The first part of the motion is I make a motion that we move forward with pickleball courts at Memorial Park. So that's the threshold question between the 2 sites. And then I have a second part dealing with phases. So that's the first part. The second part, well, let's vote on the first. Let's vote on that motion first. So I make a motion that we move forward with pickleball courts at Memorial Park.
I'll second that.
Second. Ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. So we've got a decision on that. The second is, and I like the idea, Andy, that you mentioned in the RFP to put options so that we can, the whole board, well, first finance can vote on it, and then the whole board can decide based upon actual numbers. So I would move that that the RFP be provide options of phasing in. And the first option would be 4 courts, no lights, and a reduced parking facility, and no pavilion. So those are 4 components. That's kind of the stripped down Ford model, I guess, that we're looking at under the first one. So, and then the other option would be as been proposed by Kelly Horn. Now we have questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll second that so we could discuss it.
Okay. So
What did you mean by no lots?
lights.
Oh, lights. I'm
Lights.
sorry. That's your southern accent.
It is. Guilty as charged.
I thought you said lots. Okay.
So yeah.
But we would still have the ability to put the, what do you call it, to rough in the electrical
Yes.
as part of the bid, right?
Yes, yes, so they would be roughed in.
And, did you want to say something?
If I can, I
Yeah.
would just ask if Alderman Robertson, if it could be an addendum or it could be in option, maybe an addendum to say perhaps lighting for, so you got A, which is 4 courts, no lights. B is as is proposed in this concept. Maybe an addendum to that that said lights for 2 poles for the first 4 courts, just so you know what it would cost to build them with no lights, or
Yeah,
if
that
we
would be
wanted to
good.
just add lights to those first 4 courts.
I would leave that up to the staff to come
Just
up
want to
with.
make sure that if it goes out, we can, I don't even know really in today's prices, but I'm curious to know. We can definitely write it to where we rough in the electric for sure.
Sure.
They would be giving us an itemized list with their proposal, is that right? So we would know what that,
Sure, you
Would
would,
cost.
I think it would come back as lump sum costs for those options that you're picking from.
okay.
And then maybe, I don't know, I would think we could put out one that would be back in time for the second budget vote. I can't swear to that. I mean, I don't want to, I mean, you're talking about funds for this coming year's budget that we haven't even voted on once yet, not. So I think you would need to have a good idea of what you're wanting to put in the budget. We would have to move pretty quick to get that out. Does that make sense?
We don't have any funding allocated to pickleball at all so far?
In the budget
In the
that
budget
you
you
all,
do.
in the
Proposed
budget that
budget
you all
you
looked
do.
at the budget workshop, there was
There
one,
was something in
there
there.
was an amount. I'm not gonna speak to that.
The whole amount was there.
So we did have, I think, $980,000 or so
Yeah, I
in
remember
there.
seeing it in there,
So
yeah.
what we can do is, because we have to design these courts, we have to go out to bid. It's likely that by the time that gets done, we go out to bid. So we're going to be around mid-year next year. So we can estimate an amount now, and then as we get bids in, once plans are done, if we need more money at that time, we can come back and
Here's a suggestion.
Maybe the mid-year budget.
I would like to know the dollars and cents on 4 courts and the dollars and cents on 8 courts. I would like to know the dollars and cents with lights and without lights. I'm kind of a 4-light guy. And the pavilion's the same. I'm assuming the pavilion is for those that are waiting to play, to get in the shade, maybe have a cold drink, eat a snack, especially if we have tournaments, so on and so forth. It sounds like all of us agree in some form that we want to do this. And you two, as leaders of the city, seem like you feel like it's a good idea. So does Mr. Gilly. It's just in what shape or form do we want to do it? And I don't think we've decided that yet, simply because of cost of money. So I would suggest that Andy gets everything done that we just asked him to do and try to get that out where we can get some information. But we also do a mid-year review, budget review in January now, which allows us to adjust our budget, which we did last year, and I think that worked phenomenally well.
Yeah.
So if we get all this done right away, I don't think we're probably going to have pickleball courts for a while, but if we move forward in some form and we get those numbers back within 2, 3, 4 months, then we'll know by the January mid-year budget if we want to adjust our budget up to $1 million or, but, I don't know. So that's a suggestion, not to try to rush someone to get numbers, because I think it would be a rush, since this is April the 18th. By the way, if you haven't paid your taxes today, you need to. If you haven't had to pay taxes, then congratulations.
Extension.
That's all
So
I've got to
you want to make that a motion?
Well, I can put that in a motion form. I'd like to hear what Mr. Eckroth, Mr. Gilly think about it,
Mayor,
and the
did you
mayor
want to
thinks
say
about that idea. I don't know. Is that a good idea? A bad idea?
I heard your motion. My question is, should we consider possibly building four pickleball courts with no additional parking?
And the pavilion?
No, and you include in your motion in parking for pickleball courts, or you reduce parking.
I said cut it in half instead of 150,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
because I think 50 would be plenty for pickleball.
or 4.
I think if you were just to say in some additional parking, I think that gives us additional flexibility that we can decide at some point how many parking spaces we really need.
I think the more options you can put in the RFP, the better. And I don't know, maybe we just say, we make a motion that you would give us options for the, you know, for the different scenarios. You know what we're talking about, so maybe it's too hard to,
4, 8, lights, no lights, 50 parking, 100 parking, pavilion, no pavilion.
yeah.
Pretty easy to figure out.
We'll give you a whole chart and a whole menu. Excuse me, Andy will give you a whole chart and a whole menu. Okay, thank you.
So, I'll second that motion if that's a good enough motion for the record. Is that good enough, Jesse, for us to move forward? Or do we even need a motion on this?
Well, you
Yeah.
had a motion on the floor.
You know what? We're gonna itemize costs, and then we can look at the itemized costs. I think that's what I'm hearing. Let's itemize these costs. So they will be estimates. You know, we're not actually gonna have time to go bid these, but we can give estimates on itemized costs, and we can put a package together and present it back to the Capital Projects Committee as an estimation. And we can go out to bid with the options, and we'll get actual numbers back. And at that point, we'll probably be around the mid-year review, and then we can make a budget adjustment at that point if we need to. As of now, we have sufficient funds in the budget to cover.
Okay, yeah, we do have a motion and second on the table. I'd like to amend my motion that the RFP itemize the different options, including the 8 courts and the 4 courts with all the different options so that, you know, we can make a more informed decision at that time. So
Sure.
will you agree to second? Jake,
Yeah, second, but I think Jesse, yes, I'll second that, but I think what Jesse is saying is defer it until the next capital projects meeting, until we had more information.
So we can itemize, there's two, you know, when we go out to RFP, we'll have plans designed at that point. So when we have plans designed, we probably want to have a pretty good idea of what we want to do. So what I try to do before we go out to RFP is put a cost estimate breakdown together, basically showing, hey, if we itemize the lights, this is what we estimate. If we itemize half the parking, this is what it would cost. Full parking, this is what it would cost. 4 courts, this is what it costs. 8 courts, this is what it would cost. Based on that, would give us direction to put out an RFP at a later date that says we want options on, like we might rule out 8 courts. We might say, no way, it's just way too expensive. We only want to go 4 courts. But based on the information that we'd have, that we go out and give you an itemized breakdown on, we would submit an RFP. We'd ask for options in the RFP, just like we did in the fire hall, to say, hey, if we add a 3rd bay, what would that cost additionally? At that point, we can present it back to BOMA if we need to do a budget adjustment.
Okay, so I don't guess we need a motion.
I don't think so.
No.
I think we're clear.
You're gonna bring up,
think you
you're gonna
just-
bring back to capital projects
Yes, sir.
with all the options, and then we can have a further discussion.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Okay.
But we're good on the location, so we'll move forward on doing costs at that location.
Okay, great, all right. Next item. Yeah,
All right, Rugby Restrooms. So I've been working with Mr. Gilly, Mr. Silkwood on the Rugby Restrooms. Mr. Silkwood has done a lot of work on getting some in-kind donations. We had originally put $150,000 in the budget. That was in this fiscal year's budget. As costs are increasing, and talking with Mr. Silkwood, he thought the cost would come in somewhere around $220,000. So we added another $70,000 to the draft fiscal year 23 budget. That project went out to bid, and the cost came back at, I think, yeah, $465,000. So 463,312. So significantly higher costs than we had in the budget. You know, Mr. Silkwood really tried to develop a set of plans that utilized some techniques that we thought would be cost-saving techniques. Based on the costs of the proposal, I don't know that we're really saving much money on those cost-saving techniques, which was using some shipping containers. So we just wanted some direction on whether the capital projects thinks we should move this project forward. Maybe if we take a different approach on the project. So we were just looking for some feedback from the capital projects committee based on this cost coming in much higher than budgeted.
So are you looking for an additional $243,000 for this project? Because I did the math, it was 150 plus 70,000, and the difference between that and the
Yeah, so
463.
that's what it would take if there were absolutely no change orders on the project. That was the proposal that we got in. So we would have
So
to.
no contingency. That
Yeah,
doesn't
that's with no
include.
contingencies.
So that's a 10% contingency on that, right?
That would probably be safe for the project.
And do they have lights there now? Do we have lights in the budget for them?
So lights are through the LPRF, I think LPRF grant that's going out where it's a 50-50 match. So that's on a separate grant that we have going out. I don't know that we've got an official word back on that grant, but I think it was $1 million and the city pays 50% and the grant would pay 50%
So
for
it's going to
lights
cost
out.
$1 million to put lights at the rugby field?
That grant was for lights at the rugby field, some turf. So there was multiple
some
things. So that,
Other stuff.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that, my point being is that there are some lights planned through a grant that we have and not through this project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank-
Yeah, let's turn, if you can, to the diagram of the building. I don't know what page that's on. The next one,
Keep scrolling down, Jason, and go to the next one where it has the floor plan. Yeah,
there you
right
go,
there.
There you go.
If you could expand that, please. Thank you.
So, I've talked to Mr. Silkwood today, Brian, and it seems like we're having to cut projects to fit within our budget. I'm a little disappointed that we only had one bid on this project. That's never good when you just have one bid. I'm thinking that it may be because we're using these shipping containers and some of the builders didn't want to fool with shipping containers and try to build around it. So I would like, for discussion purposes, I won't make a motion yet, but I would like to put out a new bid for only half of that building, which would be the bathrooms, and it's got a storage room, but I'd like for that to be reconfigured where that part that's storage now would be a concession stand. So it would be just the top half, yeah, just like what it's got there. We'll have bathrooms, we'll have a small concession stand. What we won't have is a meeting room. Well, yeah, I don't know, but so it would cut that building in half, and we wouldn't use shipping containers. That we would just make it a block building with brick, whatever, and hopefully we'd get more bids. And by reducing the square footage, hopefully that would reduce the cost some to the bare necessities, I guess, the bathrooms and a small concession stand. So just for discussion purposes, I'd like to throw that out as a
Motion?
I'm on board.
well, let's hear from the
Discuss.
staff first. Any thoughts on that idea?
I like that idea. I don't know why you would need a meeting room for
To the
rugby.
issue about getting one bid, that is probably a direct result of the way that when we're working with the rugby club, they had a lot of in-kind donations and labor that a contractor was going to have to work with to build this building. In terms of shipping containers were assumed to be donated. Certain things were assumed to be donated. Certain parts of the work assumed to be done by the city. So I think when you see there was one bid, there's only a certain number of people that probably would want to deal with that situation. When you're talking about the kind of building that you're talking about, that is just a basic park concrete restroom building. Those can easily be bid. I don't know what the cost will be, but just, there was a lot of technicalities that went with that bid based on all the work that the rugby group had done in advance to try to line people up that would help build it the way it was spec'd, if that makes sense.
It does.
Thank you.
Mr.
Steve?
Thanks. First of all, I'll compliment Brian and Mr. Brennan and that whole group for getting us where we are.
Yes.
You know, we've invested some in that, but it's amazing to drive out there and see what we have as women's rugby. So the city's moving forward. Rugby, talking about pickleball coming, but rugby definitely needs some restrooms. There's no doubt about that. And I appreciate them working on the in-kind. I appreciate them working on, I mean, that's pretty creative thinking using containers, old containers, but I mean, it would work. But I agree. I agree with Eddie. I'd like to see more than one bid, but I'd like to see a bid on cement blocks and brick and mortar. What you said, the basic parks restroom with a concession stand. I don't know why there's a need for a meeting room. If there is a specific need, then can you address that?
I can just address it from the fact of being a high school coach.
Yeah.
And rugby, the way that they've run it, they have made it into what I would call a high school level program. And when you have that, you want your kids to have their own space. You want a place to watch film. You want a place for them to go at halftime where they're not sitting in the grass. I mean, that's where I think the meeting room comes from. To have a team meeting, to have a place that those kids, and eventually have a facility that is their own. I understand what he's trying to create with that, because we do it in all the high school sports. So that I believe is where the meeting room comes from.
I think that's a phenomenal idea, but I really think the rugby folks right now would like to have a brick and mortar bathroom to go to, and maybe a concession to sell some hot dogs and Cokes out of.
And I'm wondering too if it can be something where we perhaps put it on a concrete pad that is big enough to add to in the future. I don't know that. Again, that's above my pay grade.
20 concrete pad out there, and right now that could be used for picnic tables and grilling or something. I don't know, but where it could be done in the future, it's a pretty good idea.
Right.
I don't see where the funds would be there right now, but I would like to see, and I think I'm agreeing with the other two committee members, look at brick and mortar, cement blocks, brick on the outside, the basic park restroom with a concession stand, and put that back out for bids. But again, if Brian or anybody's listening to this meeting, I compliment them greatly on their intuitiveness, what they've done, the work they've done, and what they continue to do, and what's come into the city through rugby. So, thank you, Mr. Rugby.
So do you need a motion? Do we need a motion, Jesse? Yeah. To rebid a smaller footprint with the larger concrete pad, as Andy said, but reduce it to just 2 bathrooms and a small concession stand on one side.
Sure.
Do we need a motion, or can y'all just do that?
We can do it.
Okay. All right. So mote it be.
Thing is too, maybe with a small storage space without.
Okay.
We'll give some options.
We like options.
All right, the last action item before Ms. Locke gets to stand up here for the next hour is the Sanders Ferry Greenway. So I want to have her come up and discuss that.
I think, okay, could you first address the golf cart barn? And Ms. Locke, we may, because of the time.
Sure.
We may end this meeting after the golf cart discussion and have another meeting, and by that time, the next meeting, maybe we could have some numbers on pickleball.
Okay,
And you can give us an update there. All of these are important, very important,
sure.
but give us a golf cart update.
So Mr. Bradley asked me just to give this update for him. The 3 arbitrators have been picked, and they are trying to schedule a date for mediation. And that is the only update that I have. So we don't have a meeting date set yet, and that is the next item on the action list.
So we've been waiting a long time. So is there any way that we can speed up the process? I mean, I know we're not holding up the process. We're ready to go. So I assume that it's the other party that's not cooperating and coming up with a date when we can start. Is that, well, I don't want to, you don't have to answer that. I think it's self-evident. Just, I guess, Mayor and Jesse work with John to try to push this along as fast as we can. We had a golf commission meeting today, this afternoon, and all of them are, very interested in this outcome.
Will do. I'll talk to Mr. Bradley tomorrow and try and make this a top priority.
Okay. And again, Ms. Locke, our apologies, but because of the time and my wife has an egg sandwich ready for me to eat, so I think it's time for us to adjourn. Yeah. So, any other motion, any other business? If not, Chairman Cunningham,
I move to adjourn.
have a motion. Second by Chairman Brown. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.